I encourage you, this is not church, please move up. So we can hear. I do that in church too. I make people move up. So no back rows. I'm gonna use no back benches. Yeah. There's against me. Would like you guys to move up. Okay. I got two. And normally I'm aware that. See you back there. Right. And that way it'll look like there are more of us here. We need you. We need everything. Okay. Good evening. Hi. Good evening. So I'm going to ask this again because I'm really bad with names and faces and stuff, but is anybody here for the first time? Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so we've been doing this for a while now, and one of the key issues or dynamics that has come up and is always going to come up when we're talking about changing language use, especially in relation to liturgy, is the place and value of tradition in relation to the value of inclusion and broader communication. So I think those have come up, and he's not here tonight, but the person who gave that impassioned statement at the end of last time, I thought, really spoke to that too. And we've looked at this relationship in a variety of ways over the weeks. We've considered the value of inclusion and language that communicates wanting to include, as well as thinking about whose interests are served by those changes. And we've looked at tradition and how complex claims to tradition are and whose interests are served by those claims. Especially in relation to tradition, books have been written about what tradition is. And differentiating tradition from traditions, from customs, blah, blah, blah. So what tradition is sacred, meaning not easily able to be changed without a big, long process and lots of steps to that. What's more of a convention, something that's done as a convention that can more easily be changed, and who gets to decide, what is, tradition that's unchanging and tradition that you can change. And we've looked at how that field, tradition and arguing about tradition, is also one where power dynamics play out. So the people in power get to decide in the end what tradition is. So tonight I thought we might explore the relationship of inclusion and tradition a bit more, but from your own perspectives, including the value that we place on each and how that factors into our experience of liturgy. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to actually have you do a lot of the work tonight. And I have a little survey or questionnaire for you all to fill out individually, and then we're going to share this in small groups and then the large group. And can you just start?
Yes, sure. And we have some clipboards if anyone would like to clipboard. And the paper too.
You're gonna do it?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
So just take a look at it and let me know if you have any questions. And this doesn't have to be, everything you've ever thought. It's really, what comes to your mind right now.
So we're taking our temperature.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Kathy, would you like a pencil?
I got one, thanks.
That's a little pencil, please.
Minutes for golf.
Anybody?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Got one more clipboard.
My thigh's wet enough.
So we're gonna do this for 5-7 minutes. Just take your time. Let me know if you have questions. It's gonna be an exciting.
I know, right? It's very reflective.
These are very good questions.
Well, yeah, we're saying.
I really don't like them.
But you want it.
I have to answer because you told me to.
All right.
Because I have to,
That's to be a good student.
I value education.
How are we doing with time? Did you watch time?
I'm done.
Just do like one or two.
You're writing a whole paragraph.
She's studious.
I'm thinking.
She's thoughtful.
Yeah, always.
Okay. Yeah. She is. So the next thing I want to have you do is get into groups of 3. So maybe you 3 and we'll triangle here, and if you could come over and be with them. And you,
I think that.
no, you can just turn around.
Oh,
I'm separating the married couple.
Yeah,
yeah.
You talk to each other.
Right.
Nate, we can come to you.
no, come on here.
Okay.
Oh, we did.
We're
Like
flexible
four.
groups.
No, we have here.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Okay, so what?
You are 3. We are 3. Great.
We're 3.
It's me.
Sure, how you're going to take it back up,
Thank you, Rob.
and then I can fill in, I can,
Oh, can you hear?
yeah, so, appreciate that.
So share with one another one thing you identified for each question, including the why. And as you're hearing each other, and maybe just go through each question at a time, like all 3 of you do question 1, all 3 of you do question 2, etc. You know what I'm saying? And then notice what similarities and differences you're hearing. Okay, go.
So we should do 2.
1, 2, 3, go.
What? No, we should all.
Okay.
Okay, 1.
Okay.
Who's like to start with the question? Deep values about situation and worship and why.
What do you value about
I guess,
Wow.
gives me a sense of
I think,
ability.
familiar
Because
because.
I haven't played first. And communities because. it
I had,
provides
It's.
the tradition provides continuity, predictability, familiarity.
And in that case, they've been learned from those.
You know, different perspectives.
I wrote,
All of that.
some of my favorite Christian traditions. I really like, Compline and Evensong. And worship that's done in a quiet way, bringing the light into the darkness. Type of experience.
I don't.
What do you have trouble with in regard to tradition and also?
From the past.
Tradition.
In regard to maybe the language wasn't like.
That would be traditional.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
So you would instead of.
Tradition,
I also put
by definition, resist even as society or the culture are living changes. So it becomes, it can devolve into a struggle, in fact.
Oh, it's not a, that's it.
Stand for the traditional.
Next to start over.
As a goal of change.
Even in the wrong class, front line.
I tell you that there's the origin of those traditions. Being in the monasteries. Born in prayer. These are all. What do you value about strong?
How the circle of inclusion can grow smaller, even though I used to be that
These forms.
the circle of inclusion grows larger.
The monasteries.
So similar to what you said, they have the tradition process, definitions stay consistent, even when the culture change.
We're able to hear.
Resist.
But he couldn't get away from people. He was starting.
Maybe it's, can you repeat your answer? I'm distracted by that.
And spiritual guidance. So. People formed, a community formed around him. Which he was essentially. He still agrees to was Texas. Regular. His values of silence.
Number three, what do you value about change, diversity, and inclusion?
It was nice, which we have.
Troubled by or we've always.
What open up. About change. They have no trouble. The words
Of the.
go back to that. And so I guess to emphasize, to me, there we go.
I said,
Is the heart of Christianity. Yeah.
but you actually hear.
And so the monasteries are where they have this sort of thing.
I really love
And
it.
we on Sunday.
I said,
Yeah, it was a little more.
what I value about diversity and inclusion, it goes back to the circle of bigger, more and more people are welcome and accepted by God, and I believe that God already loves all of you. And I think that that's people have that meditation strong. Inclusivity allows us to recognize.
I didn't know.
Because it is.
Yeah, that's the, I know, it's not, isn't, that's the. How about the last one? When you have trouble with this about change. I don't have.
Maybe I can't trust it. At least as I've experienced the situation. Could imagine everybody had changed. You had a sense that whatever this means, that it went too far to pass. But that's perhaps a personal definition. And I can't define it beyond that.
Child. I think they have trouble. I don't have any.
Depending on the rationale for change. And it makes sense. You know, it needs to be something that you understand why.
I don't know all of them. It's pretty family. It's very impressive. Very city. Yeah.
In the city, there's all this.
But then I remember. Quickly and maybe not have this power without your explanation for how to do that, how they meaningfully. Is that official? How can it be done in a way that that makes people who are trying to be added to the group feel. We've been through our questions.
You always look, I don't believe.
Just to say you got through the question.
Yeah.
And how about this for-
How about it? What do you think?
You need more time.
Yeah, we need a little more time. Thank you.
Anything else that you'd like to say?
Nothing.
What? Oh, nothing.
We're all done.
So external kind of thing.
Exclusion.
The activity.
It brought a sense of work.
Yeah, like, well, like.
Why would our understanding, our perceptions, our view like that, the broad not.
It's never any part of, you're never going to say.
Everybody that's there.
We don't change it.
But you know, there's so many.
And that's
things.
applied to our faith every bit as much, maybe even more, certainly every bit as much as it does in any other part of our life.
Especially if you stay in nice connected to mystery.
You see.
So, Doing that for nobody.
Conversation's not over, just the conversation.
Thank you.
Well.
But we haven't yet, no.
I think we do more harm than good.
Will you come back together?
Here, yeah, it was nice.
Yeah. So what did you notice doing that? What did you learn either about yourself or notice in relation to each other in terms of similarities and differences?
We were all on the same page.
Yeah.
And what was that page?
Well, in a word, we're okay with, and this is maybe a gross misrepresentation, but we're okay with keeping the liturgy in its present form. If anybody wants to,
I think
go
we
ahead.
were saying that we appreciated the structure and the structure and the form and for inclusivity, we felt that needed to be by actions, the way we greet and meet people and make it a point of welcoming, and the beautiful way that our priest welcomes everyone wherever they are in their spiritual journey to come to God's table. It isn't his table. And I think that allows people I've met who have trouble with the creed, said that statement included them. They could come. They didn't have to worry about the words because these are old forms. I was drawn to it because the old forms took me to the past, to the present, and into the future. And at times I think, oh, it'd be nice, maybe things should be said a different way, but I wouldn't want change without careful, prayerful prayer and this discernment about it. And I think we all felt that. Did I say that right?
Mhm,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Other groups?
But she said. Yes.
I think we were kindred souls for community
Yeah.
and inclusion as a
Yeah.
community. A theme of our responses was community and inclusion as expanding community and spirit.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I'm not sure.
Well, for me, music was, especially singing the hymns, increases the feeling of the spirit of the community as a whole. Like the actual experiencing that spirit together by the singing of the hymns or the saying of the prayers.
Yeah.
Although, personally, I'm not stuck with one type of liturgy. A liturgy could be many things.
Yeah, right.
But I think we took a pretty expansive view.
Yeah.
Of participation, inclusion. Even kind of having tradition give way to inclusion.
Mhm.
I mean, not kind of in a haphazard way. But I think that I think we were all on the same page.
I think
I
we're
agree.
open to inclusion,
Yeah.
for sure.
But not without a forethought. One of the things we talked about was not just for the sake of, we talked about that at length at the end, not for the sake of inclusion so much as we wanted, I spoke up that I said I like it in a logical and in a positive way. And thoughtful way, as opposed to just doing something, especially so that it doesn't turn into something harmful. Just for the sake of inclusion. Because sometimes we can, for example, we can make policy to just the individuals. And the individual may not represent what we are as a community.
And you're saying the individual, to like include an individual?
Well, to let one individual lead the way, just for the sake of including.
In other words, it has to be genuine.
Yeah,
It has to be community.
yeah,
Yeah, we talked about how that inclusion broadens community.
mhm,
It expands the power of community as a whole and empowering the person. But also broadcasts a message to those who are silent, who may not feel included, and may not be speaking up, who we might even know about, who could
Yeah,
be, who could be powerful in our community
yeah,
and in the world. You know, the silent people who are not included but come in and out.
Yeah, the sense of it,
No, go ahead.
no, the sense of exclusion can be very painful.
mhm,
We went to, I talked about, we went to Episcopal Church in Austin, Texas. And I don't think a single soul said anything to us.
Hmm.
And that is not particularly welcoming or inclusive.
Do you remember which one? I used to live there.
It was off
St.
Blazing
Thomas?
Street. What was,
It's the big ones. I think it's St. Thomas. St. David's downtown.
Yeah, maybe it's St. David.
Was it downtown?
Yeah.
St. David.
yeah, it's downtown. I mean, nice church, nice service. It's just, you know, you felt like I was in high school at a dance, you
Oh,
know.
wow.
Nobody talks to me.
Experience.
that's really bad. Now we understand.
High school there.
Yeah, I mean, it was vaguely embarrassing.
Yeah.
I want to just tag the, trying to evoke the silent people, because I think that'd be a good thing to talk about. So I'm tagging that, we'll come back to it, but I want to hear what the other group know.
Right. Right. What do we value about Christian traditions and worship and talk? I think.
I'm sorry, Pat.
Yeah, sorry. What do we value about the traditions and worship and why? They provide continuity and predictability, familiarity. They are in many respects something we've learned from such and such and they provide a cohesion among the congregation who, at least to the extent that they share those same values, which I think probably varies a lot from church to church, but at any rate, I think those are many of the feelings. Do you want to add anything, Emily?
I guess just the openness to inclusion and facilitating sort of an openness.
What'd you say?
Openness, you know, inclusiveness and openness to various experiences is a good thing, as long as it has meaning and but not when it becomes exclusive. It's sort of one in the many, you know, it can be inclusion to the point where it becomes exclusion. We want to avoid that. You know, so. But the value in change has benefit in terms of the movement of the spirit and openness to others.
Okay, any other? Do you come to any sort of realizations that you hadn't had before?
I said the resistance to change can be isolated. Resistance to change, any resistance to inclusion can be isolating for people. who are included, and you may not know it because they're not.
Right. Comes back to your point about the silence. So let's just think about that for a minute. If we assume that there are people who have opinions, but they're not sharing them, is that? What can you do about that? Or what would you want to do about that?
I think if you're friendly and human and engaging, welcoming.
What are we doing that much?
That is the best antidote.
How do you know if people feel welcome?
Engagement, conversation, ask them where do they come from, how did you hear about us?
And they smile.
And they come back.
Too often.
They come back.
Too often it's when it's because they don't come back.
Yeah.
So coming back,
And,
giving you nonverbal cues.
Yeah.
How else?
I think. Because empower the interfaith organization for advocacy. They're big on having one-to-ones. And I think we need to, as a community, those of us that are really involved, need to make a point of making those one-to-one conversations with people. And get to know them better and find out, what they like and what they don't like, and is there anything we can do to make them feel more at home, or do they have any needs? What's going on in their lives? What's their worries? What's their concerns? Get to know, spend some time with people. And make an effort to reach out rather than just, hi, nice to meet you, kind of thing. Can't always get somebody's name, but they can make a point of calling people in the directory, maybe, that we've met in church, and then
Should wear name tags,
try to get to know them
so
more.
people know. who you are.
True.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that something, what you're describing, is that something you can imagine doing?
I try. I'm trying to do it.
I'm saying this because like the church I go to every week now in the bulletin, the rector has a thing that says, talk to somebody you don't know after the service. And I wonder how many people are doing that, because I don't notice people doing that.
So it is follow-up.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's not easy,
No, it's not. I'm not saying that, yeah.
particularly in the age of COVID.
Right.
Hasn't had the effect of bringing people together. So, it's a little awkward. Are you comfortable with chit chat? Some people are more than others. But I think it does make a difference even on a superficial level the first time. I mean, you're not going to become someone's BFF first time you talk to them for 10 minutes. But you can direct them to coffee or something, and you never know. You never know the connection with people.
Actually, speaking for myself, I'm not really good at chit chat. So I like to actually go directly to something important.
Well, how much do you make a year?
Yeah, that'll bring it back.
Usually some political issue.
Start with the
Just very
insurrection.
light to it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna raise another question, because this is really good, what you're talking about, and it's welcoming people into the community so that they feel like they're part of the community. What does somebody here need to acculturate themselves to feel part of this community? That might be a hard question to answer, especially if you are here and you're part of the community, because you don't really think about this, but no, let's think about that for a minute. And an analogy might be for those of you who've had children who got into long-term relationships. Did you know, what kinds of things might you have thought about in terms of what it meant to welcome them into the family? So what is it that might make someone feel welcome or not feel welcome here?
I think one thing is to invite people to participate or invite them into conversation, because I'm fairly new here. I've been new here 2 years. And I've been invited by many, many people here to do many, many things. And a lot of things I've said yes to, and because people are so great, I've had to say no to a lot of things. But the act of inviting people to participate in a Bible study or come to a group discussion, or are you going to go to the discussion after the sermon today or not? That's that one right there, does that every Sunday. The invitation to be a part of the community.
Or come to the coffee.
Yeah, come to the music presentation.
All right, I'm gonna push on this. Come to the coffee hour and then what?
Oh, yeah.
And then you go with them. And you introduce them to somebody else, and then that somebody else introduces them to somebody. By the time they leave, they've met 6 to 8 people. That's how it works well.
Yeah.
So and you find something in common with them. You have certain warm questions without being intimidating, just interested. And you find something that you share. And then takes off. It's exciting. Then they feel like they are part of the community.
Right.
But I would have to say that this is something that here needs to be raised up, emphasized as something to pursue, so that we make a point of doing that. So that a stranger is never just left standing. You know, you see the stranger stay there. It's incumbent on every one of us to go engage the stranger in the way that Kathy has just spoken of.
And you want to build a culture of that for the whole church.
I'm sorry?
You want to build a culture of that, so it almost becomes second.
Yeah, right, and awareness to do that.
And it's not innate.
Well,
It's not innate with people.
yeah, that's right.
It's a stretch
Yeah,
for most people.
yes, that's true.
Work. It can
I
be
found
work.
it stretch for myself.
Okay, how about during worship?
How about it?
How can people be made to feel more included during worship?
Well, you could be aware of any needs they might have. Maybe they didn't get a service sheet. Maybe they came in late. You want to show them where we are on the hymn. Maybe they have children. You could show them where if needed, where the children's spot is. Just be aware. I think that's the key. Be aware. And also make an effort during the piece to say hello. I'm very conscious during worship and before worship that it's a time for worship. I don't engage in a lot of chit chat. I try to be aware. I try to sit in the back so that I can see who's new. I know where the new people are. And I try to place myself in one of the exits so that I can greet them. But I don't engage in a lot of worship, chit chat during worship. You know, you can certainly if you could say something about taking communion, that everyone's welcome, but it could be awkward doing too much. I think the time to do it is right after the service. With that invitation, I think that's really powerful. Is that what you meant?
Whatever, I didn't have, there's no right answers here.
I
just-
right.
Mainly also just want us to think about these things.
I would just say that, you know, it's not news that our service and many services are, it's a highly structured service. And it doesn't lend itself, for the most part, to making friends with a person behind you or recognize they haven't been here. The one brief opportunity is the exchange of the peace. And you may have the opportunity to recognize that somebody is somebody you don't know, and perhaps they're new, or perhaps you just don't know them. I think, but acting upon that is largely something that takes place afterwards. And as soon, possibly as soon as after the service is over, before you've left, you can turn and have a conversation, or perhaps invite them over for coffee or whatever. But I think that there's an opportunity to start to build a relationship, but pursuing that requires a somewhat different venue. I think that in the coffee hour provides that, sometimes even just as you're actually in a church, it provides it. But those are the two. You know, Sunday morning, those are the two opportunities you have.
I think it's great that we have a bulletin that has everything in it.
I'm sorry.
I think it's great that we have a bulletin. All parishes have that has everything. Because I know new people to liturgical church can get overwhelmed when you have to search through the Book of Common Prayer. And I know that's a big deal for somebody to have to type and create, but I think it's wonderful that we have that, because it makes it so clear. And I think there was some point in the service, was it last Sunday, that Jim, you invited us to say hello to someone we didn't know?
I just asked you to look.
Uh,
I just asked you to look
Oh, no.
at someone you didn't know.
Didn't know.
You didn't have to speak.
I didn't know.
Overachiever.
I want to give you, what you said triggered this for me, this experience I had, when I was living in California. Where I was living, there was an Episcopal church like less than 2 miles away, and I went there, and I'm a priest and I'm a seminary professor, and so to say that is that I claim space in those places, but I did not feel welcome there. And the reason I didn't feel welcome there is whenever there were announcements, it was like they were just talking to each other and they all knew what they were talking about. You know, and so there was no recognition that might be somebody there who hadn't been part of this community. So we're talking about Alice, who's in the hospital, which is a really good thing to talk about, and giving an update about Alice. But the assumption is we all know who Alice is, and that shouldn't, it just seemed to me like that means you're not expecting anybody there who wasn't there before, who hasn't already been part of the community. And it's really hard to be aware of that when you are part of the community.
Right.
And that's a really tough thing, I think. And I don't know, other than vigilance about it, how that gets changed.
I think, one thing would be just an emphasis on acknowledgement and gratitude. And just acknowledging someone, you're acknowledging their personhood, like looking, like Jim asked us to look, that's acknowledgement. That person's person. You know, I play a game at 4-way stop signs. I always do last. Because to me, it's giving personhood to each person that goes first. Yeah, it's just a game I play from a course I took like 20 years ago. But acknowledging each other, you can't overdo acknowledgement. Like anything you see that you want to do, acknowledge, because then it gets catching. I came to Chestnut Hill to work about 6.5 years ago, and I worked in 2 different facilities associated with Chestnut Hill Hospital. One is a big facility, and the other is a small facility for the ground floor of the hospital. And I noticed that our ground floor of the hospital is cozy, and there's certain clientele that comes there and a certain clientele that goes to the big place. And there's people that go both places. But one day I just started asking people, why do you come here? Particularly our patients of color. Like, why do you choose us? And resoundingly, the answer was because you treat us right. Because you treat us right, because you acknowledge us, because you every day you care about us, you're nice, so I think acknowledgement goes a long way. I always think of that. Am I being acknowledging? Am I being open? Am I welcome? Am I welcoming us? You know. Because we don't have much of that little facility. Bart could speak to that, but we have warmth, which is
Pleasure. It's a pleasure. to
oh my
go.
God, you know.
Yeah.
We don't even have a person to greet people when they come in, right?
Right.
But we're warm.
Yeah, I agree with Sandy. I think the message I take from that is that, you know, what works in the community works in the church and vice versa. The church is part of the community. And the interrelationships you have in the community, or what makes interrelationships in the community, are exactly the same things that make interrelationships in church. They're no different because they're all based upon people.
I do have a thought about that. This is a thought I had in our conversation with Jim. But, you know, you can, in a church, you can have a tendency to give, particularly give of money, particularly if you're privileged and have means. But do you give of yourself? Because I think when you give of yourself, you really make the connection. So it's okay to give to projects, but to be involved in projects, to personally be involved. Just, you know, from the things you've done in the community here in Northwest Philadelphia, like standing out there trying to get money for the kids' schools. I love doing that day. I got invited and I loved it, standing there fighting for money for the public schools. But being involved in actually meeting people and shaking hands, and all of a sudden your community expands and the community expands into you, and then you change. Have to, because you're welcoming.
We have to get our greeters back again, right?
You wanna head that up?
All right,
That'd
we
be
just have a
good.
couple minutes left, so steering us back to liturgy. But we've got a lot about community and how to be more welcoming in community, but what are some things in relation to liturgy that might communicate that? Newcomers especially.
Well, welcoming everybody to communion. Because that was, you know, other churches, that's not done.
Yeah, and that's so important.
Yeah.
I know several of the family have stayed because of
Mhm.
and greet a welcoming greeting by the ushers,
Mhm.
greeters when people come in, and trying to enforce I'm not the greatest at putting our name tags on.
Mhm.
So do you mean changing our traditions so that we can welcome and include more diverse parish? Is that what you mean by the question?
Well, if you want to be more inclusive, I'm not defining what inclusive is, but if you want to be more inclusive and welcoming, what might be some of the things that would help to make that more possible?
Well, I think we should define inclusive first as a church, which from what Jim's saying, we are gonna go through a period, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, of identifying who we are. Maybe not who we want to be, but who we are. We do have a mission statement. But I really am struggling with what you're asking in terms of, do we want more diversity or do we want to be inclusive? I mean, the inclusivity is a bigger umbrella, but is our goal diversity? Because, you know, then I think we would have to take a look at a lot of changes with these traditions. I kind of have the sense that that's what you're asking, the latter. Because if you want to include a lot of younger people, teenagers and families, I mean, I think where we are, Tyrone is doing a good job with that, and Alexis is doing a good job with that. But we kind of are missing out maybe on some of the middle-aged kids. I mean, we could have a service with more service that's geared to the music of young kids, not young kids, but older kids. I mean, there are a lot of things we could do. We could serve lunch that would attract more families. But do we want people that look different from us, or do we just want more people? And we have to be careful when we start to change our Anglican traditions, because I think we'd have to really define what we're trying to do here. I'm not in favor of, I'm not saying
And no, I get it.
and
And I think you all have to have that conversation.
Right.
It's not me that's gonna, you know, you're the ones that have to define what it is you're.
well, I think that's what we're kind of
Yeah,
Yeah.
taking apart here. It's a big word, inclusive.
It is.
We've talked about actions, but we haven't talked about the actual language. You know, and you know, the masculinity, the femininity, the theys, the, you know, all the different aspects of these things that, you know, we've been talking about personal welcoming and communication, but we have not talked about tonight at all about, you know, what do our prayers say? What is our tradition? Is our tradition exclusive, or are we doing it? You know, there is something about tradition I really like. It's predictability and knowing what's happening next, and it gives me a lot of comfort. And so I have to think twice. I do think twice when I hear the prayer said differently, even in the Lord's Prayer, when we changed it from trespasses to sins. I mean, that had an effect on me, and it's I don't like changing tradition because I like the predictability of it.
so changing the words is changing tradition.
For me, yeah, because that's these things I learned as a child are very rote and very comforting and very soothing. And then thinking about it, changing the words, yes, that's I understand it and I've done it, but it's taken me a lot of thought to do that.
Yeah.
If we understand that, I don't want to say tradition, I'll just say the way we do things, the way we're accustomed to doing things. If we come to understand that the way we do things is perhaps to our surprise even excluding people,
Mhm.
then where do we value that tradition versus the ability versus our desire to find ways to bring them into our fellowship? Because it seems to me that one of the goals, maybe one of the larger goals,
Mhm.
is to broaden fellowship in a meaningful way.
Oh, I agree. I'm just saying that you know, I'm just talking about the perspective I come from.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to do it. And like I had written about a few weeks ago, I change my language all the time depending on who I'm with whom I'm speaking or who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
You know, because it, I want people to be comfortable.
Could, I mean, if you ask yourself, not you, but if we ask ourselves. Do we find this more, this change, for example, and just for example, pronouns, it could be something else. More difficult in the context of church than we would in some other aspect of our lives, our family, our community, outside of the church. My guess is at least some would find it more difficult than church. Because we've always done this way.
Well, it's more than that I'm hearing, you know, it does speak to people in a particular way, and at least some of the people that are come here for that, you know, so it does challenge their comfort in a way, at the very least. So it's like, how do you
Their comfort.
negotiate between, you know, recognizing that and also recognizing that change may be helpful or necessary for other
I
people.
mean, they come for the consistency and reliability.
I don't think when Merriam-Webster adds words to the dictionary. And impact is not a word. You know, so,
It's the dictionary.
Right, and yet, like something like the Nicene Creed where Jesus was born man,
yeah.
I've said human for 30 years.
Which is,
Silently, and I know I'm saying something different. than
I
the rest
say
of
it
the
out
creed.
loud,
Well, it over time that happened,
Yeah.
right?
that is what the word means.
Yes, but I, as a woman, I appreciate the human part, not
Yeah.
having to say human when man is there,
Mhm.
you know. But there are other things like that too. I mean, there's just little things that we say, like I always say the Holy Spirit shade. I figure we gotta get one of those three. I've done that for 25 years.
Okay, our time is, I'm gonna end with a silly story. I was interim rec, this was many decades ago, actually. I was interim rector of a parish, and they had a sanctus bell. You know what a sanctus bell is? It's a bell that's on the floor usually, and it's rung to when you say holy, holy, holy.
Oh, yeah.
And also it might be rung during the consecration prayer, when the bread and the wine are being
Right.
consecrated. So this church had one, and it was sitting on the steps leading up to the altar, and it was never rung. I mean, in the days that I was there, it wasn't being used, except the lay assistant would bump into it. Because it's on the so I suggested that we remove it. And the parish secretary, who was quite elderly and had been in that parish forever, said, you can't do that. It's essential to people's worship. And we're not using it, you know, we're not using it. So I said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. We're going to remove it this Sunday. And if anybody besides you notices, I'll put it back. Nobody noticed. And so what she was really doing was somebody gave the sanctus bell to the parish, and she felt it part of her duty to honor that person by having the bell be part of worship, even though it wasn't being used as part of worship. And so, you know, when I said there were all these different levels, tradition, that's part of it. It's like figuring out, you know, what's valuable and to whom and for what reason. So the sanctus bell was removed, and then when they called a rector and a person came and discovered the sanctus bell in the sacristy, he put it back out. So
He had somebody ring it.
I hope too.
Yeah.
But you know, you never know what ends up being tradition and what ends up being
Right.
the innovation.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Flora.
You've been wonderful.